Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Chris and today's video is going to be just a little bit different. I decided I wanted to go ahead and try some hacks that I had seen on the internet that'll be beneficial to the holiday season. The first hack, I'm going to take some plastic LED candles and make them look more rustic. The second one, I am going to be making some fabric candy canes the easy way. And the third one is going to be a rust technique. So let's begin with hack number one. I wanted to try to dip some battery operated candles to give them more of a rustic look. And I saw something on Pinterest that sparked my interest. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab about a cup of beeswax. And you definitely want to do a double broil method if you decide to melt wax on top of the stove. I have also heard that you could melt it in the microwave, but my method of choice is stovetop. These are the candles that I had picked up. I got them from Amazon. I'll link that in the description box. And when doing this melting method over the stovetop, you do want to stir your wax pretty often. It will just help it melt a little bit faster, a little bit more evenly. I used to make candles, so I'm familiar with this part of this technique that we're trying out. But I have one of these really long little bamboo skewer sticks that I just like to use. And this is what we're going to have when it's melted. I have laid wax paper all over my work surfaces. Definitely want to protect your surface. Trust me, candle wax is not the easiest thing to get up. Okay, so the first candle I did was a flop. It didn't come out the right color. I had just used some cinnamon and also some of that DIY brown dust, decrepit dust. And this time I'm going to try some allspice, cinnamon, and nutmeg mixed together. And then I've got a silicone cup to make it a little easier to dip. I should have just made more candle wax and filled that cup up higher. So when I dipped these candles in there, it was a little bit more even. And you'll see the struggle I struggled with. So having it this shallow, I could only get that candle dipped so much. And after I dipped it, I'm going to let that kind of harden up a little bit. And then to get the remainder of the top, I'm just going to pour that wax on the top ledge and let it run down. And sorry about my arm being in the way. Bad angle. And then I'll just let that kind of cool down just a little bit. But I have this little paintbrush here and I decided to kind of take my mixture onto that brush and then just kind of pat it on there. I think I was just afraid that this wasn't going to be the right color again. That first one just came out too brown. You can see that one kind of sitting in front of my spice rack is one that I had actually purchased, and I was trying to get as close to that look as possible. But I'm just kind of pouncing this mixture on top of that wax. But then I just started sprinkling it over my candle. Okay, and here's what this one looks like. It actually doesn't look too bad in my opinion, but I wanted a little more red into it. So what I decided to do was add some paprika to my mixture. And then I added some of that mixture into the wax. I'd say probably roughly about a teaspoon is what I ended up adding to what little bit I've got in this cup here. And then just mixed it up very thoroughly. And then just grabbed that candle, dipped it in as much as I could, and then starting at the very top ledge, just kind of pouring it. If I do this again, I'm definitely going to melt down probably 2 cups of this wax so I can fill my little container up and dip the candles in further. And then I can just do a little pour technique to give it that runny, that wax drip look. And then I just decided, well, I'm just going to sprinkle some of this paprika over it. I tell you, I was really trying to get that look of that candle I bought. I think maybe I might have came a little close, but it was never perfect. But that's all there is to this. It's just really playing around with the different mixes. I will put the link to the Pinterest instruction tutorial that I had come across. Honestly, it's probably a lot different because I didn't even read the instructions. Okay, and these are all the ones that I dipped. And after that wax has cooled down, I am going to apply a sealer that powder. I just didn't want it flaking all over people's hands. You know, it's pretty dusty. So I sealed them. The next day, this is what they look like. They are all finished. I don't know. They look like little sausages to me. What do you guys think? I am going to try to sell these. We'll see. I will say that the one I have in my hand right here, I think that is the best color, and that is the one where I added the paprika. But I'm going to pop my batteries in here. We'll see what this looks like. And yeah, I don't think that looks too terrible. But the package of candles came with these little silicone pieces that you just put on the end. You know, if you want to put it in a candlestick, it'll just help them sit in there better. And I am going to supply this with them just in case the buyer needs to use them. But I will have, after my next project, I'm going to show you what these look like displayed. So let's go ahead and move on to hack number 2. So with this one, you're just going to need some batting, and this is the batting I used. Got it from Hobby Lobby. It is a polyester batting, and I went ahead and cut a 2-inch strip out of the batting, and then I cut that down into 1-inch strips. And then you're just going to grab fabric of your choice, and I got this red ticking stripe fabric from Hobby Lobby, and I'm just going to cut little slits at about the 1-inch mark, and then I'm going to tear the fabric. You'll also need some plastic candy canes. Mine are about 6 inches tall. We're going to start with our batting and secure the batting. You want to make sure that the tips or the ends of your candy cane aren't going to be seen. So I am going to cover that, and I'm just going to use hot glue to secure it in place. I pretty much am just gluing all 4 sides down. What I do on one end, I'm going to do on the other end. And then we're just going to grab a strip of our batting. I use hot glue to start it. And then we're just going to wrap that all the way from one end to the other. And I secure it with hot glue once again at the other end. Right, next we'll grab our fabric, and if to get that shredded look on both sides of the fabric, just pull on the strings and tear those out, and you'll get that tattered look on the edges. And then we're pretty much just going to do the same thing like we did with the batting. Just want to cover those ends so after you wrap it, those aren't sticking out. And what you do with one end, you want to do with the other end. And then after we start our strip of fabric with the hot glue, we're just going to wrap it all the way around, covering the batting. And I just love this hack. It saves the time of having to have a sewing machine or learn how to sew. And they're nice and sturdy, and they are definitely secure. I had to try to tear the fabric off at one point, and where I had put down the hot glue, but that hot glue really holds onto that fabric. So I like this little hack. It's definitely a time saver. And then once we get that glued, if you want to cut off some of those little string pieces, now's the time to do it. And I went ahead and made 3 of them. So here they are. And then I've got these rusty bells I had picked up from Hobby Lobby last year. And I'm just going to use some jute twine and tie a bell around. And I wish I had had some of my tags handy. I would have put a tag, because this next one, you're going to see how I use the tag, and it looks so good. So let's move on. I wanted to try a different look, and I grabbed some jute rope, and I decided to start with wrapping the candy cane first with the jute rope all the way across. And I just secure with hot glue, just like we did on the last one, in the beginning and at the end. And then I'm going to grab some more of my fabric, but this time when I start it, I'm just going to start it, and I'm going to wrap, but not a close wrap. And you're going to see here. And then I'll just secure that with the hot glue, trim off the excess. And that's what we have. That one was so easy. And then I made 3 of these, and pretty much doing the same as the last one. Just this time I'm going to take some jute twine and wrap it around. I'm going to grab a bell and a tag and attach it to those. And I think I love the way this one came out. And then where I stage them, you're going to see where I did one, and the one separate by itself looks good too. So I am definitely going to make some of these and put in my whatnot show to sell. And I love the way this looks with the tag. I need to take the first one apart and add a tag to it. I'm going to show you here how I display them. Here is our candle, and I think that looks really good. I definitely like it darker than the lighter. And then here are our candy canes, and I love how they look. Here's the one with the jute twine and fabric. And then here is one with just the fabric and batting, just a single one where I added 2 bells and a tag, and I love the way that looks. And this next hack, I wanted to try to rust some bells, and you're going to need white vinegar, some salt, and hydrogen peroxide. And I decided I wanted to go ahead and try this. What you will need is you will need pretty much a 4-to-1 ratio of peroxide and vinegar. And what I am wanting to rust up are these bells, especially these small ones. But I've got some of these large silver bells as well, and I thought, yeah, we'll try to do those also. But where I had seen this written, they suggested that you scuff up your surfaces and try to get that clear coat, I guess, on the metal pieces to protect them off. I did the best I could. It's not going to be perfect. That was just way too much time, and I didn't have that kind of time. I don't know too many people who would enjoy just sitting there scuffing up bells, but anyway, they got a little scuffed, okay? Definitely not perfect. Okay, so for the container to put everything in, I'm just using one of these Hall Dollar Tree vases. I figured that way when it foams, if it wants to foam up, it's definitely not going to foam this much. I'm going to put all the bells in there and place it in the sink, and then I will grab 3/4 cup of hydrogen peroxide, and then a 1/4 cup of white vinegar. And I don't know if they recommend sea salt or an iodized salt, but all I have is sea salt, and I am going to add a tablespoon of that into the mixture, stirring it until that salt dissolves. And then just going to pour that mixture over the bells. And then it suggests you let it sit for 24 to 48 hours. And this is what it started to look like after about 5 minutes. And then the next day, after about 24 hours, this is what it's looking like in the jar. And then I'm just going to fish out one of these bells and rinse it off with some water so I can show you what we've got after that 24-hour mark. And this is what one of the larger ones look like. It does have some rust, you can see, but I mean, it's not completely covered. It's definitely not to my liking. So I am going to have to let these sit for another 24 hours. And unfortunately, that means I will not be able to show you guys the verdict. Make sure you're following me on Instagram and Facebook, because I will probably update over there. The links are in my description box. This is the smaller one. The smaller one has very, very minimal little rust bits. So more than likely, I would think I'm going to have to really sand these down to get the look I want. But we will have to see what the next 24 hours has in store for us. Thank you guys so much for watching. Bye-bye.